Are you wondering what a Series EE savings bond is? Are you wondering if you should be investing in Series EE savings bonds or potentially Series I bonds? And maybe you have old Series EE bonds and you're wondering what to do with them. Well, I'm going to be addressing those questions so that you have a better idea of whether or not one of these Treasury issued securities makes sense for you. Do you spend more time planning your next vacation than you've spent planning your retirement or managing your investment portfolio? Don't worry, you're not alone. If you'd like to put together your own plan for retirement and get more out of your investments, then head over to retirewithryan.com/on-demand. I'll also put a link to that in the show notes below. So first, let's address what is a Series EE savings bonds. So I've gone to the Treasury Direct website, treasurydirect.gov, clicked on Series EE bonds, and you'll see that Series EE bonds are U.S. government savings bonds, and they're known as a non-marketable security, which means that you can't sell them. Anytime you want to buy a government Series EE bond or I bond, you have to buy it by opening up an account up at treasurydirect.gov. And these bonds will guarantee you interest for up to 30 years. And they have a special provision also that will guarantee that your money will double if you leave them invested for 20 years. And that is something that's very valuable. I'll get back to that in a minute. So the current rate that you would receive if you purchased a Series EE bond is 2.5%. And that rate resets every 6 months. So that rate will be effective until October 31st. Now, these bonds earn interest monthly. And however, that money is not money that you receive. That money is deferred. And then at a certain point down the road, you can decide whether you want to redeem your bond. And at that point, you would then receive your interest, and it could be potentially taxable to you. Now, you're earning interest all the time, so you'll see the interest actually compounding in your account. You're just not actually receiving it. There are certain types of bonds that do pay interest out to you directly, where you'd get money paid out to you either semi-annually or annually, but these bonds actually don't pay interest. The interest actually compounds on your original investment. And so next being, what if you have older Series EE bonds? So if you have older Series EE bonds, they actually talk about here how you can redeem those bonds. And with those bonds, you generally are either going to a local bank, or you can send those bonds in and have them redeemed. And anytime you have older bonds, you'd want to consider using the online savings calculator that Treasury Direct has. So you'd need the information about your bond, and you could then put in your bond information to find out what your bond is actually worth, and also what type of interest that your bond is paying. So that if you had a bond that you purchased long ago and maybe the interest is low, it could make sense to maybe redeem that bond and put it into another bond. But anytime you're redeeming these bonds, you also want to keep in mind that that's most likely going to be taxable to you. The Treasury Direct or these Series EE bonds gives you two options. You can either report the interest every year and pay tax on it, but very few people do that. Most people just let the interest defer, and then when you go to redeem the bond is when you're going to have to pay tax on the bond. So you want to keep that in mind. If you're redeeming these bonds while you're still working, probably wouldn't be the greatest idea to do that. The better time would be to wait until they mature. Maybe that's even time with your retirement, and therefore you have low income, because all this interest that you're getting is going to be taxed as ordinary income. Now, however, there is a special provision where if you are able to use the bonds for college costs, some of the interest can be avoided. However, there is adjusted gross income limit on that, and you actually have to fill out a form as well to determine if the interest that you received is going to be exempt from tax. So you see here that there's this question, is savings bonds interest taxable? And it gives you a link here. If you're using them for education, they talk about some of that information, and you'd have to fill out IRS Form 8815, which has some questions that you'd be asked about your income, whether you're single or married. And you see here that if you're single and you make over about roughly $86,000, or you're considered a head of household, married, or qualifying widow, then your AGI goes over $128,000, then you generally can't have the interest be exempt from taxation due to education purposes. Next, what's the difference between Series EE and Series I bonds? Well, I mentioned earlier how the Series EE bond pays a fixed rate of interest. We know that that rate of interest is 2.5%. And a new Series I bond will actually pay you a rate of interest of 4.3%. However, with Series EE bonds, that rate that you buy the bond at is fixed for the next 20 years. After the first 20 years, for the remaining 10 years, the interest rate could adjust. But with I bonds, the rate actually adjusts every 6 months. So that we have a high rate of interest right now on the I bond for the next 6 months of 4.3%. But that rate is actually an annualized rate. So if you take half of that rate, that's what you're actually earning for on an annual basis. And these rates actually reset every May 1st and November 1st. So that come November 1st, if the rate resets lower, it's possible that the I bond could actually earn you less interest over the year versus the Series EE bond. The other thing that Series EE bonds have, which I mentioned earlier, is that the bonds are guaranteed to double if you hold them for at least 20 years. So if you've ever heard of the rule of 70, it's a way that you can calculate how long it will take an investment to double based off a certain rate of return or time frame. So if you divide 70 by 20, it gives you 3.5 times. So that means you're getting 3.5% interest, essentially, without compounding, on the rate of return on your Series EE bond for the next 20 years. Now, will you earn that over an I bond? Well, we're unsure, because with I bonds, the rate is actually comprised of a couple different factors. One being the rate of inflation, and also secondly being a fixed rate of interest that those bonds pay. So if we scroll down a little bit on the I bonds website, we can click on I bonds interest rates, and we can see here that the fixed rate right now is 0.9%. But the adjustable rate is giving you an additional 3.4% of interest, because of the fact that the interest, or the inflation, the I measures inflation, is so high right now. So that we just don't know what will inflation be when the rate is reset in November. Maybe inflation will be lower, and if so, then the rate for the next 6 months would be less. So that fixed rate is actually a decent fixed rate that you're getting right now. So on the website, they show what the fixed rates have been in the past, and you can see for the last couple years, the fixed rate was actually 0. This past November, it was 0.4%, and if we go back further, we can see that it was 0.2. We'd have to go all the way back to 2007 to find a higher fixed rate. So this is the highest fixed rate in 12 years, which is good, but we don't know what the inflation rate will be. So there's a chart here where they show all the rates here, and it's kind of hard to see. But if we zoom in here, we can see what the rates have been. And the rates have actually been a lot lower. We can see that, we had 1.6%, 1.0, 2.2. So the rate on these bonds was definitely lower in the past, and it's only because of the fact that we've had such high inflation that the rate is higher. So it's really you're taking a little bit of a guess, right? As far as if you're going to hold this bond for a long time, you might be better off with the Series EE bond, because worst case 20 years, your money's going to double. It might take you a lot longer for your money to double if you buy a Series I bond, if you're looking at it as a longer term investment. Some of the other key things to know is both of these bonds pay you interest on a monthly basis, and but the interest is compounded semi-annually. Generally, both of these bonds are taxable. There's only if potentially that you can use it for college education and your adjusted gross income is lower enough that you could avoid some taxation. For the most part, these bonds are all done electronically. So if you want to purchase either of these, you go to treasurydirect.gov to set up your website. How much do they cost? I-bonds can be bought for as little bit as $50, and you can go all the way up to $10,000 per Social Security number. E-bonds, $25 is the initial investment, and you can also go all the way up to $10,000. And they say here that you can even go up to the penny. And both of these also, your money is locked up for 12 months. So you can't get your money for 12 months if you're going to purchase one of these. And then in the next 5 years, if you were to redeem them, you'd lose 3 months of interest. And then after that, you can get your money out without any penalty. So lastly, are Series EE bonds still a good investment? Well, given the fact that we talked about earlier that you know that if this is a longer term investment and you're investing maybe for retirement or for a child's education, it's an okay investment because you know that your money's going to at least double over the next 20 years if you're committed to holding the bond at least that long. But if we compare these rates to what you could get out in the open market, I went to a website, bankrate.com, and I pulled up CD rates. So we see here that for a 1-year CD, you can find 5.2%, 5.1%. You could do a little longer CD, get 4.75. There's other websites you can go as well. But we know that's only a 1 or 1.5 or 2-year rate. What happens to rates in 3 years or 4 years? We're at a high point right now of interest rates because our Federal Reserve has been raising rates so you can get a competitive rate on a CD or a money market, but we don't know what will be in the long term. So it could be that buying one of these Series EE bonds could be a good investment over the long term if you're committed to holding that money for a long period of time. But if it's shorter term money, that's where the CDs could be effective. And then I've mentioned in other podcasts before that something like a money market, I hold my clients' money and my money with Charles Schwab and TD Ameritrade Institutional. They offer a money market fund there, the Schwab Value Advantage Money Market Fund, symbols SWVXX. This fund currently has a rate of 4.89%. So if you're looking for a short-term investment that's liquid to get a better return than you're getting on your cash in the bank, this can be a good option. With all money market funds, they all have a cost, and this one has a cost of 3.4%. So whatever that current rate is, 4.89, if you held it for a whole year, take off 0.34 because that's the expense of holding it. So roughly about like 4.55 is what you're going to get. Still much better than the bank, and it is liquid. You can liquidate it at any point. So I hope this video was helpful on understanding the Series EE bonds, the differences between Series EE and I bonds, and also some other options that are available to you out there. Take care.